from the Trump administration and other of your European leaders in a dialogue where we talked about what we have in common as two of the Western world's, or many of the Western world's, democratic leaders. What do you think? It's been a tumultuous week, obviously, in the United States, and we're about to transition to government. What do you think about the change in government and what's happened in the past week?
Well, that's democracy. The people vote, and they vote for the new leader. That's a fact. And when I look at what happened last week, the rule of law isn't about always the fact that people always abide the rules, but when they don't, then the system comes in and makes sure that they do so again. And that's what we saw last week. And of course, when I was sitting in my couch on my couch last Wednesday evening, I thought, "Oh my goodness, what's happening over there?" But on the other hand, it's what happens in the States, and it's good to see that the rule of law is now actually being put into place and make sure that people who didn't abide the rules will meet the justice system. So that's a good thing. That's what shows that democracy works.
Yeah, democracy is difficult sometimes. You live in a country where there's strong political parties. You're with one party. There's other parties. I don't know if in your history you've ever had anything quite like what we had, but this has been a shock in the United States, to put it mildly. And I think people are concerned about a schism and about the future where the truth seems to get trampled, depending on who you follow and what they say. But I'd say for most Americans, the pictures we saw were very difficult. And I was thinking back to Europe and the history of Europe, which is obviously much lengthier than the U.S. And I was thinking back to our meeting that we had in January of 2020, where 3 cabinet secretaries from the Trump administration and yourself and some colleagues from Europe, and we talked about the shared values of Western democracy, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote, our freedom to choose who we marry, our freedom of religion, our freedom to have different political parties and a meaningful vote. And it seems like that is something that is being challenged, actually, by this recent effort. I was wondering how it's playing there in your country.
Well, it shows that a thing that we took for granted for so long is actually something to be very careful about, and to make sure that people appreciate it. Of course, I'm a politician too. I'm a member of the Dutch cabinet, but I'm a politician too. I'm also on the voting list for our upcoming election in March this year. So I feel the anxiety of the people in the capital because I have been a member of the Dutch Parliament too. And what the images showed us is also this anxiety and questions why and what will be the next step. Well, I saw that the next step in the States was making the system work, arresting people who were believed to trespass, and well, you could see that they did. But if they destroyed property of somebody else, so that's a good thing. That's how the system works. When people don't abide by the democratic rules, then the system makes sure that they are being accounted for it, that they are being held responsible for it. So that at the end of the day, it shows that democracy is about rules. It's about upholding rules, and that people obey by them. And of course, the images were terrible. I saw a picture of the Statue of Liberty with the hands in front of it, and it shows, for me, it was an example of what everybody felt and thought when they saw the images of last Wednesday, local European time, of course. I mean.
Well, I appreciate you sharing. This is the first discussion I've had with someone from Europe in a political position to talk about this, and I really appreciate you sharing that. But the U.S. and Europe are in a sense share, as does the world, this horrible COVID pandemic. We're looking at all these technologies coming, artificial intelligence and 5G and self-driving cars and robotics. And the Europe and the U.S. are putting some money into research and development in these things. And the reason they're important is because the economic tide in a democracy should raise all ships. But Europe's putting in about less than 2% into research and development. The U.S. is putting a little bit more than 2% of GDP into research and development. Do you think the pandemic's changing things about how people are investing, and what can we do to boost these levels of investment? Because we're in a very competitive world, as we discussed last January. China is out there putting billions and billions of euros or dollars or RMB into artificial intelligence. They don't have the concept of privacy that we have. They've shut out a lot of the systems that we use to communicate. They blocked off the internet. They banned Google and Twitter and Facebook, and they focused their people on just advancing. And is there something we should be doing differently? And what do you think? Where's the progress, and where's the areas of improvement for research and development and artificial intelligence and innovation?
Well, I was always in favor of investing in research and development, and the pandemic showed me that was the right position to have, because the innovations in the field of connectivity, but also in life science and health, brought us where we are today, discussing with each other with a big ocean in the middle, through the techniques we are using at this moment. Investments in life science and health came up with the vaccines, which are being used as we speak. So it's only proved right, the investments that were done the last years. And for upcoming years, there is lots and lots of more euros to spend. For instance, in the Netherlands, €500 million is part of the budget for next year to invest in deep tech, to invest in life science and health. The National Growth Fund, which I think, as we speak, let me see. The Senate in the Netherlands will discuss it this week, actually today, I think, to agree with the National Growth Fund. And there will be 20 billion euros for upcoming years to invest in research and development. And I am confident that they will do so. And that's the money we have to invest in new technologies. So the pandemic just proven us right, the people who are in favor of innovation. So of course, the 2020 has been a terrible year, economically speaking, also from a societal point of view. I really feel for entrepreneurs who don't sleep at night because they worry about their business or they worry about their employees. I feel for all the people who live alone and are now suffering from the lockdown much more than people who are living together with others. So 2021 will be a better year. It will be a year where people will be convinced that investing in research and development is the way forward.
Well, certainly you and I co-authored a wonderful op-ed talking about the need for innovation and how Europe and the United States share common goals, and focus on competition is a great way to get to innovation. And one of the great things I think the Netherlands has done is it's produced a super exciting group of exhibitors for CES 2021. Can you share with us a little bit about that and what you're most excited about?
Well, last year, January the 10th, I was flying home from Las Vegas after a great show. Well, this year we will do it in a digital way, but there are some benefits there. Of course, we are social human beings. We want to meet with each other, talk to each other, have something to eat or something to drink with each other, and look each other in the eye when we agree on investing in a company. Now it's digital. And one of the positives about it is that we don't have 50 entrepreneurs like we did last year, but more than 90. So what I always say, for every global challenge, there is a Dutch solution. And this year, there are 40 more to bring to the United States. And through the CES into the rest of the world. So that's something I'm very enthusiastic about it. And there are great examples we bring along. Qblocks, for instance, it's a company that makes it possible to put together more quantum computers. So the questions that were risen when implementing this technology now have a solution. Hyber, a national icon, a Dutch national icon, is a company which makes it possible to connect Internet of Things all over the world via satellites. So that's a great example. Heatbox, they were with us last year in Las Vegas, and CES proved to be a great stepping stone to find customers, find investors, and they are now scaling up to producing those heatbox. It's a lunchbox you can take with you and heat up your food along the way, literally speaking. So there are great examples which I took with me through the internet into CES. So please check out the directories where you can find all those great Dutch companies.
Well, thank you, Secretary Kaiser, for giving us your time and helping produce such a tremendous group of companies. I've read the press release for the Dutch presence, and it is so well and follows the themes of the show, from 5G to AI to health tech to mobility. And I think it's to supercomputing. And I think it's quantum computing. I think it's wonderful too. And we are reaching with this show. It's not in Las Vegas. It's not anywhere. It's global. And we have a huge global turnout. So thank you, Secretary Kaiser. I so much look forward to seeing you live and in person, hopefully in Europe. And if not in Europe, in the United States and Las Vegas next January. Have a great week and enjoy CES.
We certainly will meet again. Thank you very much for your time, Gary, and good luck.
Thank you. Bye now.
Next up, the Future Reimagined keynote featuring LinkedIn, Mastercard, and Accenture to break down the tech trends that could shape our future. Enjoy.
CES is the best place on earth to imagine what our future will hold. From self-driving cars to the latest in artificial intelligence, 5G connectivity to digital health and therapeutics, CES is the epicenter of global innovation and creativity. The executives joining us for the next CES keynote are leading the charge to build this new tech-enabled future. Julie Sweet is CEO of Accenture, the global professional services firm with more than 500,000 employees worldwide. Her job is to help the world's biggest companies figure out the future. She understands how diversity and inclusion benefit a company's bottom line. And she's committed to creating a more diverse, inclusive, and equal workplace. In 2020, she was named #1 on the Fortune's list of most powerful women in business. And Julie is joined by Michael Miebach, president of Mastercard. Michael began his tenure as CEO on January 1 after more than a decade with the company. He spent 2020 serving as the company's president and CEO-elect. And along the way, he has been a key driver in helping Mastercard to diversify its product offerings. As Chief Product Officer at Mastercard, Michael helped expand Mastercard's offerings from consumer cards to digital-first products like the Apple Card, blockchain, digital identity, and a variety of multi-rail payment solutions. And both Julie and Michael demonstrate a passion and commitment to technologies that improve lives and make for more inclusive communities. Today, they're going to be interviewed by Dan Roth, editor-in-chief of LinkedIn News, and explore how tech is solving the world's biggest challenges and the trends that are going to define our next decade. Please join me in welcoming Julie, Michael, and Dan to CES.
Hello, CES. Welcome to 2021. It is great to have you here. We are talking to you in whatever room you're in. I'm doing this from my attic. Our two great guests we're going to find out where they are in a second, but what we are going to cover in this session is what we are seeing in terms of how technology is changing the economy and companies over the next 10 years. What are the trends that are driving all of this change? Which ones can you bet on? And how has the last year accelerated or changed what we expect to see over the next decade? So I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture, and Michael Miebach, the new CEO of Mastercard. Welcome to you both. Are you there? Let's just start. Where are we reached you? Julie, where are you right now?
I am in my home office, which is where I've been since COVID began, since the pandemic was declared.
Okay, great. And were you prepared to work out of your home, or was this something that you were just kind of like hunkering in place and now it has turned, you've kind of built an office around you?
I did. I already had a home office. Accenture is, for decades has actually not even had a headquarters. And so when I wasn't on the road, I did work out of my home office. So for us as a company, it was a pretty seamless transition because we don't have a headquarters. For example, my leadership team is all around the world. And in fact, my CFO and I both live in Washington, D.C. area. And it's the first time the CEO and CFO of Accenture have been in the same office in something like 30 years. So that part was pretty seamless. Now, doing it permanently, that's a different conversation.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to get into that and find out any tips and tricks you have as well for how we should all be managing right now. Michael, where are we catching you?
You're catching me in Purchase, New York. Think about a better location for a company called Mastercard, as in being in Purchase. So this is one of our conference rooms. Throughout the crisis, I've mostly been here because travel wasn't possible. Normally, like Julie, I would be on the road, but there wasn't much being on the road. So we bunkered out here at our head office. And we do have a head office.
How many people are working in the head office right now?
We have about a 10% show rate. Normally, it's about 2,000 people here. It is that policy of you work where you need to work, whatever makes most sense of you, is something that we've done for years, and now we needed to do it. So it's only critical people that are coming in.
That's great. Well, let's start with the discussion about how this pandemic has changed some of these trends in how we're seeing how business is going to change over the next decade. We were talking before the session, and some of the data that really jumped out at me, that both of you shared, was how companies and consumers have accelerated their approach towards digital over this last year as we've been stuck at home, or as we've been thinking about how to motivate or work with employees who are spread all over. So, Julie, let's start with you. What are you hearing back from C-suite people you're surveying or from other clients you're working with about how this last year has changed how they're doing business? And then, Michael, I'd love to hear the same from you about customers.
Sure. I think when we take a step back, remember that COVID hit while we were already in the middle of, really revolutionary change in technology. And it's interesting, pre-COVID, I'd be on lots of panels where we were still discussing the value of technology, and literally overnight, technology became a lifeline, right? And I remember early in the crisis, many CEOs talking to me about how, look, I had parts of the company that said we could never work remotely, that are suddenly, closing the books and doing all of these things. And so the mindset has had a massive change. And I think there's really two important pivots from a technology point of view that are both here to stay, but really going to drive massive change in both how companies operate, but what they can do for their consumers as well. And that is the shift to the cloud, which was a big trend pre-COVID, but something we thought would take more like a decade. And what we see today is we're about 20% in the cloud if you look across industries, and we think that companies will get to about 80% on average, large companies, by 2025, a massive acceleration. And that is really a once in a digital era re-platforming of global business that has a lot of implications, so I'm sure we'll get into. But the second pivot is really the role of artificial intelligence. And this is something we're seeing every day. If you think about how, for example, contact centers for governments had to completely change. Governments have been slow to change, but all of a sudden they had thousands of citizens who needed vital information. And we started not just automating and doing things, but using artificial intelligence to answer inquiries. You've seen supply chain disruptions, consumers changing behavior, and you needed the data, but then the actual ability to predict new behaviors really coming from, for the most advanced companies, the ability to now use artificial intelligence to have different kinds of predictions and understanding of their business. And I think that's something that hasn't been talked about as much post-crisis, but it is what we are seeing, particularly those of our clients who were leaders pre-crisis in putting the foundation in and ahead in the cloud, and is really, we think, over the next 12 to 18 months going to differentiate them.
That's great. And I want to get into that more, especially because those build on early wins in AI and in cloud build on each other. So it sounds like what you're saying is there's probably going to be a separation for people who are investing now versus people who might come on a little bit later. Before we get into that, Michael, what are you saying?
Well, Dan, you said earlier, how about looking at consumers? So we just talked a little bit about what Julie sees on the business side. On the consumer side, if you think about our business, in spending data on how people pay for goods and services is a nice reflection of what is going on in the economy. We could have seen from the early days of the lockdown until where we are now is how consumer behavior has changed, and it has changed quite dramatically. I would argue it's worth to say that years of digital acceleration have been kind of compressed into months. You take one data point which I quite find really fascinating. At the end of last year, the portion of commerce here in the U.S. that was e-commerce was about 20%, just under 20%, and a year ago, before that, it was 13%. That is a seismic shift. So the key question then is, people were forced to stay home. They were forced to use e-commerce because there was no other way to do it. Which of these trends are going to stick? And that's the key question we're asking ourselves, and we've asked consumers. And every single month since April 2020, we've asked around 14 markets around the world, what do you believe? And with rising cases, consumer confidence went lower. And when in the summer, when things looked a lot better, consumer confidence was rising. Everybody was saying, well, this is fantastic. I'm going to use all these fantastic digital payment tools and online consumption, all of that. I will do it afterwards, after the crisis subsides, just as much. But I also want to go back and shop at my local business around the corner. So it's a bit of this as a tale of two cities. Yes, the digital trend will stick, but I also want to revert to what I was doing before because I really like that. In the end, where it's going to play out, our prediction is that about 2/3 of that trend towards e-commerce is going to stick. And it's going to stick wherever it's a better solution than what was out there in terms of physical experience before. If you want to go to a shop and you're going to you get great advice from the guy that you know in your local town, fantastic, that is a better experience. But repeatable purchases where you don't really have any advantage by being in a shop, why wouldn't you do what you just started to learn throughout the crisis? So about 2/3 will retain. That's our view.
It's interesting how much those two play into each other. This idea that consumers spend more of their time online buying just gives more data to Julie's customers to be able to apply artificial intelligence and figure out how to get those people to come back, and it's going to force companies, I would assume, to adopt this technology even faster because their customers are demanding it, because their consumers are demanding it. Julie, would you talk a little bit about how this is, first of all, how are companies, it is one thing to say, I know I have to digitize, I know I've got to do this right, I know I've got to move to the cloud, I've got to be in AI, but pulling that off is a totally different, area. You've got to, it's the right hiring, it's the right technology. Are companies, do they have what they need, and do they understand what it is going to take to make this jump?
Well, Dan, the answer, of course, is it depends, right? So, what Michael was talking about, what you're talking about, we've kind of coined the term compressed disruption, right? Because what's happening right now is that in order to do all of the different things that companies have to do, they're having to transform multiple parts of their organization at once, where they were going to do it more sequentially. And to build a little bit on what Michael said is these trends build on each other, right? So you have e-commerce spending, but at the same time, you have the whole idea of remote working. And our latest survey just from January says that about 65% of people who were not working from home before expect this will continue, right? Our latest pulse also said that there's 15% of consumers who never want to go back to a store. So not just using e-commerce, but like literally never going back to bricks and mortar. But you also have the telehealth trends, and all of them build on each other, right? In terms of like consumer behaviors. And so as a company, you have employees who have certain expectations, you're providing health care, you're reaching your consumers, and all of that really means you have to think about transforming much more quickly. And, the reality is that, a year before we went to COVID, when we did our research to look at 10 industries, 8,000 companies across the world, and we measured companies by digital adoption, breadth and depth, leadership and culture, the top 10% were doing twice as well as the bottom 25%. So we call the leaders versus the laggards. That gap literally widened overnight, right? And so what I would say to you is that as we look at companies, there's two important areas that companies are really competing on right now. The first is those who were leaders have an overnight, digital leaders, overnight competitive advantage. And so the question is, can they capitalize it on it? But for the rest of the companies, right, I would say it's a question of leadership. Because what is required isn't simply go implement some technology, right? It's the courage to do compressed disruption of your own business, right? It's the willingness to like rethink. And I talk a lot about the humility to look at other industries, other companies, and to partner to do it fast. And so if I was in the business of investing, right, I would probably be most focused on the quality of the leadership, because that is really what it's going to take. Because you can do a lot of things, right? You can help companies leapfrog, et cetera, but you have to have that mindset.
But you are talking, if we think about the next decade, it sounds like what you're saying, and Michael, what you're saying also is that there is going to be a pretty big shift in it sounds like we are entering a world where the rich are going to get richer, or the people who are figuring this out are going to just increase this chasm between the two, and you're going to see companies who are getting how to make sure that they are providing for these people who don't want to leave home, the few who still want to go back to shopping in person, who are willing to leave their homes. But most of us are going to be pretty comfortable being here, working here, living, doing all of our buying from our homes. Is that going to create a kind of an even bigger gap between the big companies and the small companies? Is there hope for some of these smaller or slower players?
Well, Dan, I think this gap has been there between small companies and large companies, and if you look at what is themed the digital players, they have a real head start. And yes, we've been on this train of digitization, and those people are pulling ahead at this point in time. But then you start to think about small businesses. Think about hundreds of millions of small businesses. And yes, the point that Judy made on leadership, there's very courageous entrepreneurs out there, but getting out there and getting the help that you need to get your business online quickly, that takes leadership across industries. For example, in our space, in the payment space, for payment companies to step forward, enable small business for online businesses and help them to run that business. So different types of leaderships are required. And I think if that happens, and we have a broader ecosystem in mind, then I think we have a chance that the chasm between the laggards and the leaders doesn't open up any further. And I think the same actually applies to consumers. Those of us that are very comfortably at home, like you just described it, Dan, but there's others that don't have the choice to be very comfortably at home. And I think what do we need to do for them? So as we move forward, in terms of this brave new world of seamless commerce, and I can choose whatever I want to do and it's all digitally enabled, well, if you can't participate, there's no choice for you. So how do we enable that choice? And I think here, in terms of corporate leadership, there's more to be done by pulling people in. That is starting with financial inclusion, that is ensuring that you create solutions for different types of work models going forward. The gig worker is going to be more of a reality. Portable benefits for gig workers to change jobs as consumer behaviors change and different needs need to be satisfied, and all of that. So I think that stepping up is needed, and then we can have a digital economy that works for everybody.
And Michael, is that happening? Do you think it's happening? And is it happening fast enough that we are getting this kind of payment infrastructure and enablement to make that kind of?
I would argue this has been talked about for years, that this is needed. And COVID doesn't have many positive aspects, but I think that's one, that this is a realization that this is an opportunity to do this at this point in time. So if I just look across our industry, the competitive tensions are clearly there. But the desire to work together and do something for SMEs and make sure there's lending offers and credit to access, or do something for the gig workers, I sense an increased sense of partnership.
Okay. So if you were, as we think about this session is what's going to happen in 10 years, you are confident, somewhat confident, that the underpinning that we will have a full payments infrastructure in place that allows this kind of easy movement of jobs and allows gig workers to get paid easier. Will that be in place, or will we still be slowly working our way toward it?
Well, let's hope we talk at CES 10 years from now and see if what I'm going to say is true, but I am very confident.
All right.
Julie was making the point at the beginning that this digital transformation has been going on, and we've all kind of working on that. So the homework has been done. In fact, we put it to good use this year. So if you look at what happened, the whole world moved online. And everything worked. We didn't miss a step as an industry. So that's fantastic. But what we did do is we did satisfy immediate crisis needs. But then you think about where is the consumer going now? And that new consumer that has just identified that doing something online is actually quite easy. And it is quite comfortable. And yes, I might have a few question marks on safety and how much data I want to give. All of those are points that are now to be thought through. How do we move from realizing crisis needs to where's the consumer now going to go with that? So continuously putting the consumer forward. And then the fundamental underlying trend that I think needs to be realized and that we need to satisfy is to ensure that there's trust in this brave new digital world. So there's going to be a lot of young people that are going to be quite happy to provide all sorts of data into this ecosystem. And then imagine a world where that trust is actually compromised. Then we could have this all unravel. So trusted networks, solutions around digital identity, safety, security, some data principles. These are all things that are not really thought about and discussed to much great degree across nations at a higher level. Some companies individually think about that, and there's some more homework to do so that that brave new world 10 years from now can actually work.
I want to switch topics a little bit, but to touch on things that both of you have talked about. Recently, Brene Brown mentioned that she found that 2020 was a year actually of two pandemics. There was the pandemic of coronavirus. There was also this pandemic of racial injustice and racial inequality, and companies realizing that they had to do much more and actually put their money where their mouth is around righting some historical wrongs. And I would love to get a sense from both of you of how over the next 10 years you see that playing out. What is the corporate role in making sure that there is equality in the workplace and making sure that you are reaching consumers of all stripes and that people all have an equal ability to get ahead. So Julie, why don't we start with you on how you're thinking about this and how your customers are, your clients are.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have a very strong commitment at Accenture toward equality, and particularly have been focused for several years around equality and advancement of our Black employees and our Latinx and Hispanic American employees. And we took the opportunity when George Floyd was murdered to take a fresh look at how we were approaching our commitment both within Accenture and outside of Accenture. And so we've set external goals similar to what we set back in 2015 to reach where we set it for women, that we're globally going to be at gender equality by 2025. So we have 500,000 people. We're at 45% now, so not a small goal. And we've now set external goals. And to your point around what's our role, we really believe that as a company, starting with ourselves, we have to make sure that we are focused on equality and we're taking the steps to fight racism and to provide opportunities for advancement. We also are doing that within the communities and trying to do so as much as possible by linking with other companies, because that's where you get scaled impact. And so whether it's at the Business Roundtable, where I'm on the board and we're doing a lot of work there, the organization that Ken Chenault and Ken Frazier just started called 110, where we're one of the founding members, but really trying to work together with other companies. And I think that's an important role. And it goes really to what Michael was saying in terms of even with the competitive dynamics, right, that companies are saying we have to take a step back and we have to work together where we have common interests. And I think one of the things as we look forward is that in the past, oftentimes people talked about, principles of free market and, what is really needed to have the economy flourish. I think those principles are changing, right? Because whether it's what Michael talked about, for example, with data privacy, or it's how do you bridge the digital divide and make sure that you have internet access so that everyone can participate in e-commerce and in remote jobs, to also really providing the foundations of equality, there's really, I think, new rules being written, and I hope they'll be global, and I think there's more interest in that, where we say the fundamental principles of what is needed to make a digital economy, global economy work are different, right, than the past. And I think there's more recognition, although a ton of work to do. And of course, the issues cross. I mean, here in the US, a third of Black families do not have access to the internet. The implications of that for employment and education are enormous, right? So I would say a rewriting of what is needed to support a thriving global economy provides an opportunity for companies to work together with governments and not-for-profits in a different way.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, Julie, pretty much everything you just said, we think about it exactly in the same way. As it is my belief that as a company, whatever you do in terms of your business is a good starting point to see how you can address inequalities out there, because that's an expertise, that's how you make a difference. So why not leverage it to address inequalities? And that is what we have been doing for the last decade when it comes to financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, you don't have a financial identity, you cannot transact on the net, and all of that. So we pulled 500 million people into the formal financial system just to actually achieve this goal in the middle of this crisis, around about May this year. And we put another stake in the ground to pull another 500 million people, make it 1 billion out of the 2.5 billion people around the globe that are not included financially. And then the murder of George Floyd happens, and it put a spotlight on something that is widely understood and was there for a long time, but it raised it to the forefront. And we took a step back, very similar to what Julie was describing, and said, what else can we do? And it was our belief that what's at work is systematic racism. So we figured we don't need a donation. We don't need a flavor of the month. We don't need an immediate response. We need something systematic, a systematic way to address the wealth and opportunity gap and so forth. And we, linking back to my first point, what do we do as a business? How can we systematically help address that point? Well, the first thing is, you can always do better inside your own business to start with. So we put out goals where we said we will increase by 50% our VP level senior management, VP level and above. So that's good. There's obviously pay gaps and things like that. So we put formal goals around that. So that's inside the company, making sure you create the same level opportunities. But then you look outside of the company into society. What can we do on a thought leadership base? Oftentimes it's not understood widely enough why there is a wealth and opportunity gap for Black Americans, for example. So we're partnering with Rockefeller and others out there to understand and do some research around this. So that's important. And then we take that research and then we come to our own business, and that is really on the market side of our business. Do we have the right kind of solutions? Do we have the right kind of products that we're putting out there to put into the hands of Black Americans, of business owners, Black American business owners, and so forth, to address the opportunity gap that they have? And significant commitment put behind that, $500 million that we put across these three dimensions: our own company, what we do in terms of thought leadership across society, and inside of our own business. And one of the easiest thing that any business can do is we all have suppliers. And do we have the kind of companies? Are we looking for the startups in our incubator that are Black owned? Well, the vast majority is not, but they are there if you just start looking for them. Exactly what we've done. And then the same on the supplier side. So you round that all off, and then you come to the point that was, the murder of George Floyd put a specific spotlight on racism here in the United States, but we are in 200 plus countries around the world. And racism, inequality shows its face in different ways around the world. And as a global citizen, we're having different programs in different parts around the world. Financial inclusion cuts across, that's a starting point for us, but we'll need to find different approaches in Africa, in Europe, wherever else we're active.
So do you think those are both great answers? And it's really interesting to think about what implications this will have in 10 years. Will we look back and say, I know there were questions that came up after George Floyd's murder. A month later, and people said, what happens when the anger dies down? What happens when the spotlight shifts, as it inevitably will? Will businesses continue to focus on this? What you're both describing is almost a rewriting of, or a kind of a rejiggering of how business thinks about what its role is. And I know, Julie, you mentioned the Business Roundtable. Business Roundtable famously came out and said, hey, we're not going to put shareholders first. That is not necessarily the focus of business. You got to think about stakeholders as well, think about society. In 10 years, will we look back and say this changed how businesses operate? We're willing to work more together. We have to think more about the impact business is having on society, or do you think this will maybe not carry over for the next, for that long?
It's a good question, because I remember back in 2016, as you may recall, there was that terrible week in the US where we had 2 Black men murdered, and then we had the ambush in Dallas. And at the time, we were optimistic that that terrible week would lead to something new. I do believe this is different. And there'll be, I'm sure, lots of academic papers written around why, and all the different events that came together. But and I believe it's, from my own perspective, different for 2 reasons. First of all, I do think this has been building, right? And we've had this, and there came this time with all these other issues where I have really seen a difference. I mean, the Business Roundtable was always focused on diversity, but was not making the types of statements and the work together that they're doing now. And it is different. You're seeing action, right? So we're going from commitment to action, and I'm seeing that privately and publicly. But there's also a very other very practical reason, is that this is good business, right? It is good business, and it's good business on 3 dimensions. You know, Michael can talk about better than I the consumer dimension of needing to be able to have a more, you know, you have a very diverse consumer group, and that's true around the world, right? And they're really important and growing, and they're growing in income, et cetera. And so there's a whole, you know, driving force behind who are your consumers. Secondly, there's the talent question. Soon after, when I was talking about this with one of my clients who's in the oil industry, who said, look, it's really hard to get people to go into the oil industry. I need to be able to tap into a broader group of people. And so they were asking for my help in thinking through how could they tap into more, because it's not been a traditional industry where they had a lot of diversity, ethnic diversity, and you know, it's a talent issue, right? And so that is a reason as well. And then there's the diversity around innovation. I mean, we started really doubling down on diversity back in 2014 when we became the first company in my industry to set up digital. And our business was less than 20% digital, cloud, and security. It's now 70%. And we've been investing and made bold goals and have had an incredible run, right? 9% CAGR. We're the leader in our industry. And we did so because we did not believe that we could pivot our company. Think about that pivot, right? Without more diversity, so you get the innovation and the thinking. So if you think about who your buyers are, the need for talent, and then innovation, right? These are reasons why not only is it the right thing to do, but it's the right business answer. And that's why I have confidence that this is a pivotal moment, and we will have a very different, world in 10 years.
Super interesting. I love the talent component. I think you're totally right. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I think what is different now is that we have a unique opportunity coming out of this crisis. There's a need to rebuild, and that allows you to put aside some of the legacy and build in a different way. And I think that is generally understood, that if we're going to continue to try to do the same thing that we've done in the past, we're looking at getting back on our feet in terms of growth. It's going to require just a different approach. So the starting point is entirely different. So you're looking at not quite a blank piece of paper, but a somewhat more blank piece of paper. So that's the first thing. I think some of the aspects of what COVID has brought to us lead right into this point. I was intrigued when Julie was just talking about access to new talent pools. Working from home. What does this tell us? From a hiring perspective, I can go to communities where I can find diverse talent today because I'm much more comfortable that these people don't actually have to show up in my office in New York or Singapore or somewhere. So we're having a few, post-crisis aspects that make us think about the rebuilding in a different way. Now, the aspect of commercial viability on how you address diversity and inequality questions. We've learned that over the last decade, and this comes to this point about capitalism versus stakeholder capitalism versus just thinking about the shareholder all along. I think stakeholder capitalism here, it plays out in a way that, when we thought 10 years ago that financial inclusion is good business, we took a 10-year view. With purely a shareholder focus, we would have never done that. And we said, well, let's see what happens in 10 years. Well, we build our own market, but at the same time, we pull people into the financial system. And that is good business. We've learned to do that. And as we look forward into new solutions, new markets, new verticals, address racism, help the SME sector, whatever it is, with that kind of a learning, I think that's going to work. And others have been on a similar trip to the point that Julie made earlier. Partnerships matter in the space, and we find more and more like-minded companies that are willing to take the longer-term view. So right now, I think it is a pivotal moment. There's no going back.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about opening up all kinds of markets for talent and for customers and new learnings that you can get as you move to a more diverse workforce and a more diverse customer base. So this is all, I think, good news, and it's going to really change, I would assume, how companies operate over the next 10 years as we just learn, as these changes happen. We only have a few minutes left. This is the Consumer Electronics Show, CES. I do want to get into this question of what kind of technologies you guys are betting on over the next few years. Is there anything you're especially excited about? Julie, you already mentioned AI, the cloud, other things that you're looking at, VR, 5G, when you are trying to prepare your companies for whatever is coming down the road. What are the ones that you're spending most of your time, or you're saying we have to understand how this is going to, how this works?
Sure. Well, let me just start. So I've talked about cloud and AI, which I think are two critical pivots. The third, though, is 5G. In fact, we just did some research that I wanted to share with you that we haven't yet published, where 8 in 10 executives believe that 5G will have a significant impact on their business, and 57% say it will be revolutionary. And what's interesting is that, of course, 5G has started with the consumer, right? When the first wave, and we've got, you know, around the world, you've got people using it with your smartphones. But we're now in the wave that will really be driven by business. But what 5G will enable, right, is tied, of course, to the consumer and the ability to do more of the 3D printing, for example, 3D printing of devices, for able to provide what you want, when you want it, and where you want it. It'll change supply chains because of that. The ability to move at much greater speed, you know, it will really transform business. And so we're spending a lot of time, because again, 5G was something that pre-COVID we believed would take a lot longer in the business world, in part because things like manufacturing were going to change much slower. They're happening much, much faster. And so as a CEO of a company, if you don't understand what is the impact on 5G on my industry, on the and on my company, right, you're missing something. And I think that 5G is probably not being talked enough about more broadly in terms of the capabilities, because pre-crisis it was thought to be, you know, a much slower, sort of rise.
Julie, when you talk about 5G, is the biggest impact the idea of having always-on devices with you at all times that can, you never worry about how you're communicating with any part of your supply chain, or is it more than that?
It's because the fact of that with 5G, you don't have any delay, right? There's zero latency. If you think about how do you use technology in surgeries, right? How do you use it for autonomous driving? So the ability to use technology to really change how we live, right? When you have zero latency is massive. Right, when you think about these more important, areas and more sensitive areas, and that's where, because of course we've already seen the impact, like in the smartphones, but that's where you have to start opening up possibilities that that we don't have today at scale.
Awesome, Michael. What are you looking at?
Well, 5G. So how do I make this more interesting? So let's say, we're also looking at cloud, because you obviously have to push a lot more intelligence, AI-powered intelligence, to the edge of your network. I mean, where we reach every corner and every crook of the world. And if that's your starting point and you say, okay, what else is 5G bringing? There will always be buyers and sellers. So if I look through my lens, in terms of how commerce will change over the next years, always buyers and sellers. What might change is that the buyers might not be Dan or Julie. The buyers might be a machine. So if you think about Internet of Things, tens of billions of connected devices, what will enable that? It's 5G. So on the top of the use cases that Julie just explained, some of these consumer experiences that might be there, telemedicine, whatever it is, I think the next big click forward is the world of Internet of Things and micropayments, fractional payments flying all over the world. With zero latency, as Julie was saying. I think that's where we're going to go. So it's all these foundational technologies coming together. And there would never be a good conversation around emerging technologies if we wouldn't talk about blockchain. So I just throw that in. Early at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about trust and how there needs to be trust in this brave new digital world. And that is a trust enabling technology, which I think is going to be really critical, because there will always be buyers and sellers that don't know each other. Who is at either end of the transaction? What is being exchanged? So proof of provenance, identifying identity, those are all things that blockchain will help us do. And if you throw that on top of these other three, I think you kind of got the package.
That's great. Well, Michael and Julie, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I am looking forward, and I'd love to get a commitment from you. 2031, we meet again right here, and we review all of these and see how we did. You guys in?
There.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Michael.
The future is now, which means it's time for more CES 2021. I'm Naomi Kyle.
And I'm Brian Tong, and if you're just joining us, welcome from around the world. We're here to help you navigate your way through our CES digital venue as this massive event goes completely digital for the first time.
That's right. Throughout the day, we've seen and heard from industry leaders, from new and emerging innovators, and some cultural icons as well. In fact, we just wrapped a discussion that, quite frankly, has me pumped for the future, which, given what 2020 brought us, is quite an accomplishment. The Future Reimagined keynote featuring Mastercard CEO Michael Maybach and Accenture CEO Julie Sweet covered a wide range of forward-looking topics on e-commerce, diversity, and more. What did you think about what they said regarding 5G, Brian?
Well, with 5G, it's kind of some of the things that we've talked about. We're still waiting for it to really get here. But just imagine how it's just going to take off. I could think about whether it's your phone, your tablet, or your watch. We could literally watch streaming 4K video, and the implications that has not only for just media consumption, but for all types of devices in business,
health,
in industry. It's going to explode.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it's going to speed up everything. That's what I just can't wait for. Excited to hear from those industry giants as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, if you'd like to rewatch the Future Reimagined keynote or any of those you've seen today, they'll be on demand through to February 15th. Now, I'd like to introduce a force in the advancement for equality and a truly inspiring human to boot. Please welcome from CES 2021's official equality partner, the female quotient, Shelly Zalis. Thank you so much for joining
What's up,
us
Shelly?
here today.
So excited to be here, especially talking about women in tech and all good things like that. So let's go.
All right.
Let's go.
Well, let's start off with that. You've been supporting the advancement of women in the space. What inspired you to establish the female quotient in the first place?
You know, it's really funny because here we are at CES. It was CES. I, as the only female CEO, top 25 my entire career in market research. I wanted to break into technology. I wanted to come to CES in Vegas. I heard there was 150,000 people, less than 3% were women, and it was pretty intimidating. And so I had an option: don't go, or pick up the phone, invite a few girlfriends, and walk the floor together. And within 24 hours, you know, a few girlfriends turned into 50, and we walked the floor. And two remarkable things happened. One, every single guy's head turned, like, where the heck did all you women come from? And
Yeah.
it's phrase, power of the pack. A woman alone is power. Collectively, we have impact. It was this wow moment. And the second was I was surrounded by people just like me with some of the same challenges and some of the same concerns. And, you know, why do we have to transform to the rules that make no sense? And within a minute, you know, we went from a moment to a movement. We have over 50,000 women in the workplace now working together to support one another, to bring our authentic selves to the table, break the rules that make no sense. My nickname is Chief Troublemaker, and embrace our differences as truly our greatest strength. So it all started at CES.
You know, Shelly, you're in a really unique position here because, yes, you are a woman. You talk about women on the show floor, opening eyes. Okay, that pink top, I'm going to tell you right now, that opened my eyes. That's bomb. It's like,
Hey, your pink suit is even the bomber.
the bomb. This is the bomber. You know, I kind of talked about how you're in a unique position. You've seen this evolve. You know, I've been working in tech for over a decade. I've seen the calls for more female representation. So what is, in your specific position, what has progress looked since you started working in this space?
Well, it's really amazing, and I want to applaud CES as well because we are the official equality partners, and we host an equality lounge at CES. And when we talk about representation, it really is about intentionality, and I think that's the progress that we've really seen is a conscious mindset for change. We're all here in the equality lounge. We have hundreds of female speakers that are experts on topics. And so when people say there's no women to be featured as keynotes, I'm like, hello, we're all right here. There are plenty of us. You got to open your eyes. You got to look, and don't look for the CEO because we know that we are, not hitting the levels of CEO, but look for topic experts. And if you look, you shall find. So it is about intentionality and consciousness. And I think that's the biggest evolution that we see now. We're not just talking about the problems. We're not admiring the problems. We're activating solutions for change and creating measurement for accountability to ensure that we have representation and reflection across the board.
Well, thank you so much for doing that for us women out there. And research shows that the pandemic actually just recently disproportionately impacted women at home and in the workplace. How have you seen women step up and lead through this pandemic?
I think that women supporting other women and leaders. I don't think that it's a gender issue. Gender equality is not a female issue. It's a social and economic issue. We also know that diversity is good for business. We've all seen that data. And yet, when you look at primary caregivers, we are seeing a disproportionate impact on women, women of color, and primary caregivers being affected. And, when you interview female small business owners, 54% of female small business owners are closing their businesses, and they say that they're closing permanently as a result of COVID. Women in tech are 1.6 times more likely to be laid off or furloughed because they're at less senior level positions than the men. And when you look at VC funding, in 2019, we saw over $3.3 billion going to investing in female-owned businesses, which was a record high. But when you think about it, it only represented less than 2.8% of capital invested across the entire ecosystem. So things change with the changes, with truly understanding that we need to make more conscious decisions. I always say equality is the choice, unconscious bias is an excuse. If you use the word unconscious, you're conscious. So, make the right choices.
When you said that number, it stuck out of me. As you were saying it, I said that's just a drop in the bucket, right? And there's still has so much more growth to go. I'd like to kind of maybe focus in on the tech sector. How has the pandemic specifically impacted the funding and support for women-owned businesses as well?
Well, I think that Barstool is doing a remarkable job of, investing very consciously in companies, as well as CES and CTA making a very conscious effort to invest in female-owned businesses. And of course, our floor tours, we always bring visibility. If you can see her, you can be her. I'm the co-founder of See Her. Very important to bring visibility to women doing remarkable things and showcasing the technology and the work that they're doing. So I think that visibility goes a long way to being role models, to inspiring more women to get into the tech fields. And what we clearly know from AI and biases, bias in, bias out. So we need more diversity at the table in everything we do, especially in technology.
I 100% agree. Just in the last year, we've seen a lot of brands be more vocal and intentional about diversity and inclusion, thankfully. But what do you think marketers need to think about as they try to engage core audiences and reach out to new ones?
Well, I think we have to walk the talk. And I think we're seeing a really big step forward to not just signing pledges and petitions, which in my opinion is a surrogate for doing nothing, but for moving the needle, taking action, and holding themselves accountable for change. And also consumers are keeping brands honest because they have purpose in their DNA, and they want to buy from brands that care about social issues. And they do research online to look up what companies are doing. So companies need to walk the talk consistently, authentically, and know that it does resonate with consumers, not only for buying power, but also for hiring power. Our millennials today, our next generation, have purpose in their DNA. They only want to work for companies that are making the world a better place.
I agree.
Yeah, I can see that right with my nieces and nephews, just how their brains have changed of, how they think about this. Really quick last thing to wrap things up. You're the expert here. What do you think the next 10 years looks like for women's equality in business?
Well, listen, according to the World Economic Forum, pre-pandemic, they said it'll take over 99.5 years to close the gender gap and 257 years to close the pay gap.
Wow.
And so with the pandemic, we've gone backwards about another 25 years. I can tell you with 1,000% certainty, we are 250 plus years way too long. So within the next 10 years, I plan to help us all be conscious about the gaps, where we are, where we want to go, and how we can get there. And let's just do it.
Well, thank you so much, Shelley, for all the work you're doing. I mean, I very much appreciate it. I'm sure everyone else and all the women out there do as well.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. And I noticed the WWE title belt back there.
Oh.
I know you representing.
Nice
Look at that. Oh, here she goes. Look. That's a woman of strength right there.
There's my title belt.
That's what I'm talking about.
And there's my nickname.
Chief troublemaker.
There you go. Hey, thanks so much, Shelley. That was great. All right, and there is plenty more to see here at CES 2021. Let's say you want to see more programming about the future of motor vehicles. Our digital hub makes it so easy for you to find sessions and keynotes that match your interests.
Yeah, and connect easily with everyone from fellow attendees to small startups to the biggest brands on the planet. They're all right at your fingertips. Here's more on how to get the most out of today's show. This year, CES is all digital, and with that comes a brand new digital venue. Let's take a look at some of the elements that will enable you to fully customize your event experience, starting with the profile. Here you can upload a headshot and current contact information, but perhaps the most important aspect of the profile are your interests. Filling out your interests will allow us to recommend exhibitors and sessions. Make sure you complete who you're interested in connecting with to ensure we recommend the types of business contacts you'd like to meet. It's a great way for you to discover new products and for others to discover you. And here's a pro tip. If you're looking to utilize the meeting or messaging functions, make sure to tick that option in your profile settings. We'll get to those connection options in a minute. But first, let's talk about the CES 2021 schedule. There is a wide variety of conference sessions, spotlights, and keynotes to see during the event, and the schedule is the place to find all of them. It's organized chronologically, and each session is listed in your local time. You can refine your search on the left side of the search window, and once you've found the session you'd like to attend, simply click Add to My Show, and it will be added to your event calendar. You can access your schedule in a few different ways. First, through the My Show tab at the top of the screen. For a quick glanceable view, check out the Activity Center drop-down on the right side of your screen. It will give you a countdown to the time you've got left before your next session or keynote and will remind you of any upcoming meetings. Now, it wouldn't be CES without any expo hall, and this year is no different. With more than 70 exhibitor spotlights over the course of the event, there are plenty of live presentations and demos to experience. So make sure when you see those in the schedule and throughout the exhibitor showcase, you add them to your agenda once again with the Add to My Show button. Adding these sessions are particularly important when you want to come back to review the on-demand content after the show wraps. Fun fact, the site and resources will be available through February 15th, 2021. The Exhibitors tab is going to be your home for the gallery of products and services on display throughout the event. While our live stream is a great place to start your day and come back to throughout your time at CES, the Exhibitor Gallery is where you get to explore almost 2,000 exhibitors and showcase the future of tech. With live demos, virtual booth experiences, and content exclusive to our CES audience. Customizing your experience is only part of the CES 2021 agenda. Connecting you with peers and experts is another. This year, we've made it easy to discover people and products you're interested in, as well as for those exhibitors and attendees to discover you based on those interests. Whether you're looking to connect with a particular speaker, any of our exhibitors, or simply another attendee, our directories are your one-stop shop. Simply search by company, topic, or technology keyword, and you're good to go. The site also features a place to create and manage meetings. Select up to 29 other attendees to add to a meeting. Once at least one person accepts, the site will automatically generate a Microsoft Teams meeting link at your specific date and time. The Activity Center on the right side of the screen is a great place to keep track of those meetings quickly and easily. With this brand new experience, we encourage you to explore the many facets of the site to get the most out of your CES 2021 experience. Now, as two tech nerds, I gotta say, I feel like we're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, and based on our Twitter feed, it feels like our viewers, you guys, are also. Let's take a look at what you guys have been saying on this Twitter board right here. Actually, I wanted to call out one real quick here. Tina Anthony, thank you so much for your tweet about Corey Berry. She loves this quote that she said during the presentation, and I agree with her. My job as a leader is to create the conditions for other leaders to be successful. Absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that, Tina.
Okay, I got something for you. I'm gonna scroll over here down to our boy, Alan Root. I swear it's work. Hashtag CES 2021. He's in his own zone. Virtual reality. We have, different exhibitor showcase where you can kind of experience it like that. He's grooving. He's definitely experiencing that.
Totally grooving. I wonder what kind of work he's doing, actually.
Probably
nothing.
I don't know.
Probably not work related.
Beat Saber or something like that.
Totally.
All right, now one theme that always makes us one theme that always makes headlines here at CES are the products around mobile communications.
Yeah, our next session takes a look at trends consumers, what the trends and consumers can expect in the mobile communication space, including 5G. This is CES 2021.